Hi, and welcome to HMP's HR Talks. I'm here with my partner, Cara, and we are here to do podcast number 8. I'm super excited by that. I know, can you believe it? 8 of them
No.
already.
So
And as exciting as it is to talk about HR, today we're going to talk about a topic that probably is a little less exciting and a little scarier, but one that's hit us recently inside
mhm.
of business. And so we thought this is a great opportunity to bring it up. And if one person, just one person learns from this and it doesn't happen to them, I will feel like we did our job. But we're here to talk about the dangers of social media and AI and what that looks like for employees, inside and outside work, really.
Yeah,
Because most of it happens outside of work, but influences and impacts their inside of work.
it is the wildest thing. I think as time goes on, the kind of intermingling of all the spaces of our lives just gets so much smaller. And,
It's a good way to word it,
it
yeah.
used to be like 6 degrees of separation. Now it's so much less.
Yeah.
So it can be dangerous. And also, unfortunately, sometimes those that we think are friends, it's so much easier for them to not actually be who they say they are, or the old term catfishing. So
Yeah.
not to do that. Yeah.
It's one of those things where first and foremost, I'm like, shame on people for doing it. Like, I can't even
Mhm.
imagine why you would want to harm another human being like that. But even more so, there's two folds to the damage that really occurs in those moments. One is the physical damage, whatever it is, and we'll talk about some scenarios and situations we've had in work. But the second one is the mental and emotional damage, right? Because you feel
Yeah.
vulnerable in most of those scenarios, and then someone takes advantage of that vulnerability. And so then, you've got this lack of trust in people. And so
Yeah.
it develops two sides of it. And you're just like, your heart goes out to people. And I mean, all of us in some form have been spammed, catfish, whatever. Like,
Gosh,
I don't know
yes.
one person who hasn't. I mean, how many times you've answered the phone thinking it's, so and so, and it really is some fake person, trying to force you to buy something or sell something
Hmm.
or whatever. So in today's society, it happens all the time, but some of the situations and scenarios can be really, really detrimental on your work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I wanted to drag this conversation into is we just recently had a client who contacted us for an awful situation. One of their employees had to come into the office and explain that they had been catfished in a very personal way with someone that they thought they were in a relationship with.
Mm.
And then, unfortunately, they had sent images that they do not wish to have out on the internet, right out there. And then this person or persons or whatever it was threatened to like display these photos all over Instagram, etc., if they didn't get paid for it, right? So
Oh,
how do you go into your employer and sit and have a conversation about the fact that one, you chose to do something outside of work that's now impacting your work and the organization negatively, but also, that's so vulnerable to talk about that kind
yes.
of stuff.
I can't get over, and I just have to applaud that individual for having the integrity and the humility to say, I care so much about my work. I care about this organization and I want to represent it well. And I'm going to have this really embarrassing conversation, one for the content, but two for the situation.
Yeah.
And so, yes, can we like peel? There's like so many layers. And my like logistical mindset's like, okay, so if
Like,
one, what do you do when someone comes in and tells you this? Like, what are we supposed to do?
yeah.
I would be just floored.
So I will tell you, it's a new one for me.
Yeah.
In my very long, crazy career in HR, I've had situations where there have been embarrassing things out there, but not a catfish situation that impacted their
Mhm.
work. So, it's one of those things. First and foremost, like you said, you applaud the person for their strength to be able to come forward. But then second, you need to know that you're taking care of two situations as a leader. One, the impact to the organization,
Mhm.
and then two, that employee's well-being, right? Because both are being impacted negatively in that moment.
Yeah.
And so you have to juggle both sides of that, right? So this particular employee, not only did they come and have to disclose this, which is humiliating and embarrassing, and you're doing it in front of your boss. And in this case, it's two different sexes, right? So the boss is a female and the employee's a male. So it's even more awkward, right? To have to
Yeah.
come and talk to your boss about that stuff. But one, you need to make sure that you take care of your employee first, right? That's your
I
first
love
priority
that.
is are you okay? I'm sorry this happened to you. Have empathy for them, right? And really just offer the solutions. We have EAP, right? We have, there are counselors, there are people to talk to. Are you comfortable still working today? How are you feeling, right? You need to put them into a scenario and a safe space because they're feeling super unsafe right now, right? And so give them that safe space because one, you're going to be able to continue the conversation and help them through it and the organization through it. Because then the second part of it is the hard conversation. Do you have the person's number? What did they threaten you with? What did you expose or show? What potentially
Mm.
are you visually in the picture of whatever it is, right? Um, and so you have this situation where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to have this conversation about potential, quite inappropriate, individual conversations that you wouldn't have in a work
Gosh.
environment. And and you need your employee to feel safe enough to have the conversation, say, here's what happened and here's the information I have. And in this scenario and situation, the employee, the photos are fully exposed, including their face, right? And
Oh
so
no.
it's one of those situations that you're like, okay, so how do you proceed as an employer? Well, they contacted us and they said, what do we do? Like,
Yeah.
this is new for us. And I'm like, hey, new for me too, but we'll figure it out. The first thing you want to do is you want to find out how much data and information that whoever is catfishing you has, right? Do they have your name? Do they have your city? Do you have your work location? Those kinds of things are important, right? To know what you're facing. And then my recommendation is always to tell that employee to remove themselves from social media for a period of time, completely
Mm.
remove themselves because it's harder to be targeted when you're not out there online, right? So how do they link it to your Instagram account? How do they link it to your Facebook page if you don't have a footprint at all for a period of time, right? Because you're not going to pay the person. I mean, that's just not an
Yeah.
option.
Mm-mm.
So you've got to figure out other ways to do it. And so those kinds of recommendations are going to come much better from an employer or an HR person who has had the empathy with that employee. So they've got an ability to connect, to continue that conversation as opposed to something that becomes really awkward.
Oh gosh. I love that throughout the entirety of this, in every role that I've worked at, HR has been seen as one of two camps typically. Either it's a place to focus on the employees to make sure that they have the best place that they can possibly work and they're supported, or it's protecting the company from risk. What I love about what you just said is you blended both. Not only, and I like that you started with the human, because that's at the end of the day what we all are. And it's the human and human resources. You focused on how can we support, including some of the business, resources that are there. But now, how do I also protect this organization from risk? And I love that you blended those
Yeah.
two worlds so beautifully well for them. Because this is such a shameful experience. And not even if it wasn't the content was different, but just the feeling of being like, how could I not have seen this? Because there are varying levels, I feel like, of scams, and they are all hurtful.
Yeah.
And there was one that I actually fell for. I was applying for a job, what I thought was a job. It was just like, data entry admin. And they sent me a writing sample, and I was like, oh, look at all these mistakes in the writing sample or like the thing that I'm supposed to type up. They must be testing my, attention to detail.
Oh
But
no.
it was one of those things that once you got started, they would ask for, well, we need this much for a laptop, and then we'll reimburse you at your first payroll. Thank goodness I'm married to a guy who like investigates fraud for a living because I was like, oh
You were
my
super
gosh,
lucky.
like here I am thinking, oh wow, I'm so clever for finding it. But that's also the thing. We are all human and we want to believe the best in others. And then unfortunately, there are those out there who will take advantage. And as an employer, we have to balance, or as a support to a business owner, we have to balance how can we show grace to an individual versus or not versus, but and protect this organization from potential risk if this is to get out there. So let's say now, unfortunately, let's say that there, images are leaked and things
Yeah.
do now impact the organization. This kind of ties into a previous podcast we did with the PR crisis, but what do you do then if it does impact, the workplace or the stakeholders and the vendors and they find out? What happens then?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that you prepare for in advance, right? You go for the idea it isn't going to happen, but you prepare for the worst. And so I always put together my crisis plan right on the spot. So once we talk about how we help the employee to feel okay, and then how we ask them to do things like remove themselves from social media for a period of time, because that protects the company as well. But then the other thing is, okay, now let's put a crisis plan together. Who
Okay.
would need to be alerted if this did get out? In this case, a board of directors, right? Because it is an organization that has one. Potentially other employees, because if that got blasted out there, in their own department, et cetera, right? But you don't
Yeah.
implement any of it, but you put together your action plan.
Yeah.
So let's say this got out. What do we do? One, we have to alert the board of directors that this happened, this occurred. The thing to remember is, one and foremost, we all make mistakes. We
Mhm.
all do things that we wish we could take back in life.
Yeah.
So don't ever judge this individual based on
Yeah.
what occurred for them in that scenario. You and I may never have done those things, but we've also done stupid things ourselves, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So we have to be careful of that, but you have to go into your meetings with people like the board of directors, like, you know, um, the vendors, the customers, clients, whoever might be impacted, and start it with that way. Like, this is a horrible, outrageous situation that occurred to one of our employees. In their personal life, they were taken advantage of, and it is now impacting, them, and this is what's occurring, right?
Mhm.
So you want to take it in that flow so people start to put the right kind of lens on it when they're thinking through this. Like, this isn't about this employee doing something wrong. This is about this employee being violated in
Yeah.
a way that is now impacting the organization, right? And then the other thing is, you have to have that conversation with the employee to say, hey, if this gets out, how do you want us to handle it from your perspective, right? I mean, this
Mhm.
employee, a lot of people quit. There's they just can't deal with having the two of those associated together, right?
Yeah.
And you have to respect that if that's what they need to do in that moment. But you can't unsee something that you've seen, right? If the employees see it, all you can do is put together damage control on how you're going to manage it and keep the employee in the loop, because
Yeah.
it is them that is being impacted by it. And so you want to know, hey, this is what I may have to do or say. Are you comfortable with me bringing this into it, right? Because I think it's critically important throughout the process you keep them in the communication, and I think that's how they in turn will feel safer in the environment.
Oh,
But it's
wow.
still difficult. Like, and then I feel, because both you and the employee are sitting there waiting for the shoe to drop to find out whether or not this is really going to get blasted out there. And
Hmm.
so what we did in this particular situation is we looked at how much data the catfish person had, and they didn't have the work environment.
Mm.
Um, they did have a full name, but they didn't have a location other than the state of, right? And so it was, it's one of those things where there's not as much opportunity that the employer is going to be impacted by it because of the lack of information.
Good.
But this is also where you turn off your social media, because who knows whether he has on his Facebook where he works,
Hmm.
or on his Instagram, all of his friends or people that he works with, right? So those are the things that you're like, it might be a good idea for a short period of time for you to step back from that so this can be protected, and then move back into your social media presence.
I like that. And sometimes, especially today, news and information and scandals, and they all come so fast. Sometimes with time, a lot of times with time, I feel like it can just blow over and there'll be a new topic of gossip or a new thing to kind of focus on as if you just kind of remove yourself away from it. But it is also hard because now it kind of, brings into the AI component. And I feel like it would be the same messaging if
I
it
know, I was
was
just gonna say,
my
I was wondering that.
face, right? Or would
Yep.
would you change it at all if it was a verifiably fake image, or would you kind of follow the same process?
I would follow the same process, and
Okay.
here's why. Who's to say? Like, I can tell you
Mhm.
that's not my body every day of the week if there was a picture of my head on someone else's body. But are you going to believe me or not? Like, there's
That's
this
true.
inappropriate photo with my face on it. Your brain has now associated the two. So I don't know that I would go out and message it differently, like, oh, this is all fake, this is all. I don't think that would
Yeah.
do any good,
Okay.
as much as I'm still so sorry that you are being attacked this way, because it's still violating you, because there's
Yeah.
this image of a pretend you out there. Granted, I'm hoping it's a really great looking
Yeah,
pretend
I know.
you,
You're like,
like 20 years
maybe.
younger, and the whole nine yards, right? Um, all joking aside, but you nowadays it's hard to tell. Like,
It's
you can
so
go
hard.
online and tell. You can't, I don't know if that's a real person or not. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know?
It is so scary. Like and I feel like we're still kind of catching up to what things can do. And so I'm sure things will change with time. But for right now, where we're at, there is just so much ambiguity. What is real? What is false? And again, who am I chatting with or who is trying to chat with me? We have to just be alert. And we don't want to be suspicious of everybody. But
But you need to protect
unfortunately,
yourself.
it's the
Yeah. And
reality. Yeah.
the other thing I would say is if you're in doubt, don't send anything across any type of communication, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying just inappropriate, even appropriate, like, hey, here's me and my kids, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Know who you're sending and communicating with, but then also be really cautious what you send across. I don't care what
Absolutely.
it is. I would highly recommend doing a FaceTime call as opposed to a picture any day of the week. For that very reason, because you have no idea what someone's going to utilize that information for or how that information gets out there. Even if you sent it to the right person, photo of me and my kids went to my mom one day, right?
Hmm.
And then who knows how many other people have scammed that information off and
Yeah.
altered it and changed it and whatever the case may be. People are smart nowadays, unfortunately.
Now, I might, this is going to be a kind of a weird question between us, but now, so let's say in these two scenarios, the individual was taken advantage of. It was not their choice for this information to be threatened to be distributed. Now, let's say employee has their own to get some, it's a side gig. They sell images or have an OnlyFans account that now is attached to their work persona. Let's just call it that. What do we do then when they're kind of technically two separate work environments, but now they've merged and either stakeholders or clients or vendors have caught on to this separate world? What do we as HR do then? What can we do, if anything?
So the
Should
only
we?
leg we would have to stand on in most environments, there are certain environments where you can be very clear about what can or cannot be posted or social mediaized on your behalf, right? Depending upon the industry and the type of role and your security levels, right? You have a lot more control that way. But day to day, let's just do average, right?
Mhm.
Um, the first and foremost, the only thing you really have to go back on is usually your policy on moonlighting, right? Because your policy on having a second job says it cannot impact your first job. And if what's happening in your second job is impacting your first job, even if the hours aren't the same, it's impacting it, you probably do have a leg to stand on to have a
Okay.
conversation with your employee.
I see my brain did not go to the moonlighting policy. It went to the social media policy, but that would actually make more sense. What I also appreciate is you're kind of allowing that individual the dignity to say, this is my career, even though it might be a different or a job, even though it might be a different choice than
Yeah.
what we as, an employer would have want to represent our brand. But I appreciate that it's like, okay, we're looking at your other job. It's not a policy, like a social media policy, what you're posting on your free time decision. It's not this is a path you are choosing to take to further your income. And then you're able to make that statement. So I kind of appreciate, again, you're doing a very employee centric approach, no
Yeah,
matter what.
you're sweet thinking it's an employee centric. It's really employer protected because there's so much you can't do on social media. Like you can't tell people what they can or can't post if it has nothing. If they're posting something like that, but
Oh,
then they list out your work environment, then yeah, you can say something.
I
But whatever they
see.
do on their social media, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over as an employer at all because it's personal as
Hmm.
long as they're not utilizing the company's name or anything in those posts. But I can have control over how their work in another organization is impacting the work in our organization.
I like that. I think it's going to be a really interesting future of corporate, if you want to call it that, workspace, because a lot of kids these days, when you ask them what they want to be, it is no longer, call it HR professional, doctor, lawyer, accounting, whatever, marine biologist. It's influencer, YouTube,
I know.
streamer. And so even if they choose to join a tradition, call it traditional work environment, it's very likely there could be some sort of side um, public presence, public virtual presence, whether it's one that we would prefer to be private or one that's preferred to be like for anyone to see. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
As
stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of that coming up.
I, well, I am so glad that that client had you as a source of support, but also a source of direction and kind of chaos, or not chaos, order in the chaos, excuse me, to kind of pave a way forward in
Tomorrow,
a very sensitive situation. And again, protecting both the employee as well as the
the company.
employer.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, very fine balance, and doing both well can be very, very hard. So I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, it is what we have. HR is there to help make sure that our businesses and our employers are protected as best as they can be while creating a positive experience. And even if it doesn't work
Yeah,
out well, as we talked about this in our first podcast, there is a way to have these conversations with dignity and honor and care for a human while protecting an organization. So
absolutely.
really appreciate that. Well, with that, that concludes our eighth HR
I
talk
know.
for
8.
a very interesting topic with Agent Pinnacle. But I do think it ties along really nicely with, we talked about, PR and how we work with our partners and, a crisis or a scandal. And this is a
Yeah,
unique, but a very different type of situation.
agreed.
So thank you for your expertise. I just love being able to listen and learn from you because it is
You always
something.
challenge me. You bring the craziest ideas sometimes to the plate. I'm like, what? We're talking about what?
Sometimes, I mean, and this one for sure, especially, I was like, I don't even know what questions to ask because where do you take it? So it was
Yeah.
helpful to kind of have you share the story and how to go about the process. But remember, if you think you've had a bad day in HR, every challenge, though, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to move forward. So thank you for spending time with Agent Pinnacle. Until next time.